The criminals coming from Europe, arriving on the island of Haiti. That's the name of the entire island. That's what the Arawak people called it. And this for thousands of years before the criminals arrived from Europe. And when they arrived, they find the people there. It is estimated there were between 2 and 3.5 million Arawaks on the island in 1492. 11 years later, it was estimated less than 100,000 people were living on this island.
Shalom. First and foremost, before I get started, I'd like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Chakodash. Double honors to the apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone, who we will and teach well and taught us his truth. And Yahweh Mahal Laha Bakaryam, Godspeed to the elect of the nation of Israel. This is your brother Thaboa'ah. Lord willing, coming back to you with another edifying lesson in the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Yahweh is the true name of the Heavenly Father, who the world ignorantly calls God. Okay, Yah meaning he, Hawa meaning to be or to exist. Bahasham is in the name. And Yahweh Shai is the true name of the Heavenly Son, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus. Yah meaning he, Hawa Shai meaning salvation or deliverance. Okay, and those are the true names you need to call upon in these last and evil days for salvation, ultimately. You know, but in this lesson, what we're going to be dealing with is the video we just watched, and we're going to be going into a little bit of history. We're not going to be too long, but we're going to go into who was the indigenous people over here in America. Who was the indigenous people that were over here in America? Okay, and who was those Europeans that came over to the Americas? Okay, so we're going to kind of go into both and explain to you, break down according to the Bible, okay, on who those people were, okay, because we understand those indigenous people that were over here in America when the Europeans arrived were the Northern Kingdom, and the scriptures will tell you that, okay, because there's so, when you get to this point right here that I'm about to read, after this, there's not too much information on what really happened to the Northern Kingdom, except you go into the Apocrypha and you see what happens to them. And that's the Apocrypha it was part of the 1611 King James Version Bible that they took out. Okay, and it has a lot of information dealing with the Greek Empire, what happens to the Northern Kingdom, and etc. Okay, the Babylonian Empire, right? Information and certain things you need to know. But let's start. This is 2 Kings chapter 17 and verse 6. It says, in the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria, and placed them in Halah and in Habor by the river of Gozan and in the city of the Medes. For so it was that the children of Israel had sinned against the Lord their power, which had brought them out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods. Now we understand that this is talking about the Northern Kingdom getting taken into captivity under the Assyrians. Okay, why? Because they were going off, they were going off. So the Lord, this was a punishment from the Lord. And we understand that this was, this took place, after the death of King Solomon, because with Solomon, when he was, king, the 12 tribes were united. Okay. And after the death, there was a split. Okay. The Southern Kingdom ended up becoming the Southern Kingdom. Okay. Which is, represents Judah. Okay. But you can also add Benjamin and Levi in there. And then the Northern Kingdom as well, okay, which are the other tribes. So we understand that this was Israel, okay, the Northern Kingdom getting taken into captivity under the Assyrians. Now, you might wonder, okay, well, it gives you a little bit of information. What happened? Now, where did they go? What happened to them? And where would they be now? Right? Well, we would have to go to 2nd Ezra, the 13th chapter. And we'll start at the 39th verse, and it says, and whereas thou sawest that he gathered another peaceable multitude unto him. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hoshea the king, whom Salmanasar the king of Assyria led away captive. And he carried them over the waters, and so they came into another land. Okay. It says, but they took this counsel among themselves. Who took the counsel among themselves? The Northern Kingdom. They took the counsel among themselves. Now, not all exactly, Salaki, but they took this counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. So they took counsel among themselves, and they were planning within their mind, right? Or they planned to leave to break off from the Assyrians and go to another country where never mankind dwelt. What country was that? That was America, and we're going to show you. Verse 42, it says that they might keep their statues, which they never kept in their own land. So they were going to go to this country where no man dwelt, so they can keep the law, statutes, and commandments. Verse 43, and they entered into Euphrates by the narrow places of the river. For the Most High then shewed signs for them, and held still the flood till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Arsareth. Okay, now what is Arsareth? Now, when you look up Arsareth, right, within Google, I just looked up Arsareth, America. It brings me to a Jewish encyclopedia. Okay. And when you read the first paragraph, it says, this is by Morris Jestro Jr., Kaufman Kohler. It says, the name of the land beyond the great river, far away from the habitation of man, in which the 10 tribes of Israel will dwell, observing the laws of Moses until the time of the restoration. Okay, according to IV, ESD, XIII 45, it says Columbus identified America with this land. So Christopher Columbus identified Arsareth, right, to be America, okay, which is the place, the United States now, where we dwell at, okay, where we stay at. So those indigenous people, okay, were the Northern Kingdom, and they came over here to the Americas. All right, so they were the ones who first came over here to the Americas. But now we have to get into the history on who those Europeans were, because we understand that after you had the Greek Empire, and then you had the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire ended up falling. Okay, but it said, it was prophesied in Revelation the 13th chapter how it would be revived again. Okay, this is Revelation chapter 13 and verse 3. And it says, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death. Right. That was the Roman Empire, right? And the Greco-Roman Empire. It says, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wandered after the beast. So that deadly wound, it was said that it would be healed again. Okay, that it would be brought back. Okay, and that's where you get Revelation the 20th chapter, where it says, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. And the time, and really this is speaking of the Edomites coming back into power, okay, because the Edomites were the ones who were in power during the time of the Roman Empire, and that ended up falling, but it said it would be healed again. So now let him be loose for a little season. That's talking about the Renaissance period, the late 1400s, early 1500s, okay. As when we played this video, she talked about 1492 when they came over here, right? Because that's when they ended up, the Europeans, which are the so-called white people, and according to the Bible, those are the biblical Edomites, okay, those Europeans that came over here, okay, and it says that they would be loose for a little season, meaning that they would come back into power, okay, and that was during, like I said, during the time of the Renaissance, which Renaissance means rebirth, okay, so the Greco-Roman Empire would be rebirthed back into the earth, okay. And it started with the late 1400s, you see? And we know and we understand that, as when you played the video on when they came over here, on how there was, she said there was like about 3 million, roughly paraphrasing what she said. Okay, and then after 11 years or something to that effect, that there was only 100,000, because we understand when the Europeans ended up coming over here, okay, they made a lot of peace treaties with the Northern Kingdom. They made peace treaties. Okay, we were peaceable men. The Northern Kingdom, they were peaceable. They allowed them to, they let them come in, they made peace treaties, agreements on certain things. And guess what? The Europeans, are the so-called white people, they ended up breaking every single last one of those peace treaties. Okay? And that's Psalms 55 and 21, which says, grab it real quick. And it says, the words of his, 55 and 20. It says he had put forth his hands against such as be at peace with him. He had broken his covenant, and you could use this for, on what the Europeans did with the Northern Kingdom. Because all those peace treaties that were made, and they broke every single last one of them. And they took this land, okay, what you call America, they took it by violence. Okay. This is Micah chapter 2 and verse 1 and 2. It says, woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it because it is in the power of their hand. And they covet fields and they take them by violence. The way that the so-called white people ended up getting control over America was by violence. That's why Obadiah 1 and 10 is for that violence against thy brother Jacob. Okay, because that's how they conquered this land. Okay, they, never trust thine enemy. They swiftly took this land. They made, like I said, these peace treaties, all these agreements, sharing the land. And what happened? They broke every last one of them, and they slaughtered a bunch of the indigenous people. Okay, and then eventually there was those slave trade. There was different slave trades that was taking place where they're shipping off the Northern Kingdom to these different Caribbean lands. Okay, but that's how they got this land, was through violence. It says they take them by violence in houses and take them away. So they oppress a man in his house, even a man in his heritage. Okay, a man in his house, even a man in his heritage. Okay, and what did they end up doing after they did that? And they ended up conquering. Okay, they put their wine, they enforced their wine upon the people. Okay, which we'll grab Habakkuk 2 right after. But this is Sirach chapter 10 and verse 8. It says, because of unrighteous dealings, right? Unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit. So it wasn't a righteous thing. What they did was a righteous way to get the land. No, it was unrighteous dealings. All right. It says the kingdom is translated from one people to another. So since we got that established, okay, on how the Northern Kingdom, or those indigenous people were the Northern Kingdom that were over here in America, and those Europeans were so-called white people, or the biblical Edomites, who ended up coming over here and conquer and taking over this land, okay, through violence. You see? And we read to you Revelation 13 and 3 and Revelation the 20th chapter on how that deadly wound was going to be healed, and how the biblical Edom, how they were going to come back into power. Okay. And a reason why we know that they're back in power is when you get Revelation, the 6th chapter, and the 3rd verse, or the 4th verse, it says, and there went out another horse that was red, which represents the Edomites. Okay, when you read Genesis, the 25th chapter, Esau came out red all over like a hairy garment, right? It says, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword, which that goes back to Genesis, the 27th chapter, and around the 40th verse, where Isaac gave Esau his blessing, that he would have complete, have fatness of the earth and the dew of heaven from above, but by thy sword shall he live, and he shall conquer. And that's the way he conquered that's the way he conquered us. It was all through violence and by his sword, okay, which really ties into his way of life and whatnot, okay. But, Lord willing, this was edifying. Before I close off, I'd like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Shalom to the elect.